Welcome to the Pucks with Haggs podcast, a proud member of the CLNS Media Network. Make sure to hit that subscribe button to the Rinkside YouTube channel and turn on notifications for when a new video drops right on the channel. The show is also brought to you by PrizePicks, the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. Welcome into the Pucks with Haggs podcast. I'm your host, Joe Haggerty. You can find my work at joehaggerty.substack.com. Subscribe and get yourself a premium membership. Get all my Bruins and NHL writing sent straight directly to your inbox. I also write columns 3 times a week for the Boston Sports Journal, so go to bostonsportsjournal.com. Get yourself a subscription there as well. Some great stuff to read there, and I also do a weekly Q&A with the subscribers over there, so subscribe to that one as well, and you get all kinds of great coverage for all the 4 sports. This is the 204th episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast, so welcome in. Thank you for listening. Thank you for interacting. Thank you for commenting. Thank you for being involved. Appreciate it. Always fun, too. Today, we're going to do a mailbag 4th of July holiday weekend episode where I'm going to answer some fan questions, just go over a couple of things really quick as well. But mostly just talk about the development camp wrapping up, any last morsels left over from July 1st free agency, and kind of where the Bruins sit at this point. So, there's plenty of questions to be asked. I think the latest thing I will mention today is the sad passing of Lyndon Byers as well. I think he was 61 years old. Word last night, Friday night, word filtered around that he had passed away. It was out there this morning. I think his wife had confirmed it on Facebook. Really sad. Obviously sad passing for any of the Boston Bruins former players. For me, he's a guy that played when I was kind of younger, when I was growing up. So he, those teams definitely held a place in my heart. And obviously he stuck around Boston as so many other Bruins do. And he became a radio personality on AAF with Greg Hill and was a big part of that show for a long time. So he, and was a larger than life figure, both when he played for the Bruins and then afterwards. I remember always seeing, you'd see his giant chopper at the 99 in Woburn, and he'd always be there at the bar, having a good time like he always did. He was one of those guys that was a lot of fun to be around, had a big personality, was kind of the life of the party type guy. Very gregarious and all that, boisterous. And I remember you'd always see it there. If you were going by at night, a lot of times you'd see his big motorcycle out there in front. You knew LB was in the building. So, sad news, that we're not going to hear his voice anymore. I know his health had not been great in recent years, so that's really too bad. And my thoughts and sympathies go out to his family, his friends, and all of his former teammates, because LB was one of those guys that always put a smile on your face. And certainly he was one of the tough guys when he was on the Boston Bruins, and he was a fighter, basically, and an enforcer type on those Bruins teams. So thoughts and prayers go out to everybody that knew him and loved him. But as far as on the ice stuff goes, we are just going to talk mostly about Dev Camp. I wish I had been able to go to more of the days of Dev Camp, but it coincided with my vacation to Maine with my family. So I came down for the one Dev Camp practice on, I think it was Tuesday on July 1st when free agency was going on. And I watched the D and the forwards, got to see everybody. But I did not see the scrimmage. I did not see the 3-on-3 tournament, which is always like my favorite thing to watch, because I think you see so much of the skill, of the way the players think the game, of the mistakes that they make and the limitations that they have. It reveals a lot when you watch players play 3-on-3 small area. I think it tells you a lot about players, sometimes more than full ice, when they can get away with certain things because they can just skate faster than everybody else, or they're bigger and stronger than everybody else, or whatever. But I think when you see them in that setting, it really gives you something to sort of dig into and really look at the strengths and weaknesses of players. I did see some footage on social media from some players it sounds like there was some very good players. A lot of the players that got drafted a week ago um, definitely flashed and looked good and acquitted themselves really well. James Hagens, obviously, I think was head and shoulders above everybody else. The edge work, the skating, the shot too, the stick handling too. He's one of those guys that, and I think I mentioned this to Mick the other day. His lower hand on the stick is really low when he's handling the puck, and it gives him great stick control, great ability to turn really fast and be elusive, and just lose defenders with quick changes of direction. And it also allows him to really get off a shot really quick too. And that makes him a dangerous offensive guy when he can move the puck that fast, when he can skate that fast, and when he's got a lethal shot too. You can see why, and he's got the vision too, because it seems like his head is always up and he's looking to make plays as well. So you're talking about a really, really high-end good player that the Bruins were lucky to get at number 7. He kind of fell to them, very fortunate, but like that is the kind of player that they have not had at Dev Camp in recent memory. They have not had those star type players that really flash, that provide some electricity for development camp and really get fans excited about the future and what's to come. And it wasn't just him. There were other players too. Most of the players that got drafted this past draft, 2025, looked good. Whether it was Will Moore, whether it was Cooper Simpson, I think looked really good as well. The defenseman, Vatek Richards, but that wasn't Blenar, I think was the name that they used when they drafted him, and what he's going to be using moving forward. He looked outstanding as well, looked very skilled for a defenseman, and that looks like a real diamond in the rough kind of pick. So you're talking about, a bunch of players that got selected with those picks that I think look really good and have some high-end talent, and look like they're going to be, generating offense and could be heard from a few years from now, or at least have a good sort of chance to develop and turn into something. So, and the Bruins were also getting like A's, and they were getting high marks across the board for the draft that they had. And I think, that's good. Whether it was, the position that they were drafting in, whether it was the pressure to really like hit home runs now, because they have missed in past drafts, and they've also traded away picks. Whether it was a combination of all those things and really needing after the season that they had to hit on these draft picks and make it worth sort of steering the ship into the iceberg like they did at the trade deadline by trading all the veterans and really sinking to the bottom. It has worked out. It definitely became worth it for them this year to have that sort of reprieve and to take a bunch of high-end players and high ceiling players that they hope are going to develop, but also just showed their skill level and their ability in development camp. And some other players look good too. I think Dean Letourneau looked better than he did last year. Looks like he's ready to take a step at BC, and it looks much more ready for what's to come in Hockey East and the NCAAs for him as opposed to last year, where he did not look, when I saw him at camp, like he was, ready for any of that. So that's good news. And a lot of the other players, the Boston College players, look really good. Andre Gasso looked good. Oscar Jelvik was not there, but so many of the other players did. And the bottom line, I think now, is that the Bruins have really replenished their farm system and their draft and development pipeline. And I think, you're not going to see them being at the very bottom of the league anymore after the draft that they had. And frankly, after some of the players that they've developed in the last couple of years. But I also think, it could be a year or two at least, maybe more, for some of these players before you're actually going to really see them hit and develop and pay dividends. So you also have to be patient, thinking this is a 2 to 3 year process, this retooling, where they're not going to see these players right away at the NHL level, and it's going to be a little while. So there's going to be some patience involved as well. As far as free agency goes, I think there just continues to be a lot of criticism about Tanner Jeannot in the 5-year deal, 3.4 million that he was given. People scratching their heads saying they don't think it makes sense, think it was a massive overpay, and in some ways it is an overpay, but all of free agency is an overpay. You're always paying premium rates in free agency for players. Like if you're going to go the free agent route, you're going to overpay. That's part of free agency. That's part of why you try to avoid that at all costs. Um, and really, I think what it came down to for the Bruins is a couple of things. A lot of the players re-upped with their teams because the teams had salary cap room because the salary cap is going up significantly each of the next few years, and they have the ability and the wherewithal to re-sign these players. So a lot of players like Brock Besser and others, they re-upped right before free agency opened. Brad Marchand with Florida, Sam Bennett with Florida. So there were not a lot of really good players in the market. It was kind of a weak free agent class. There was Nikolai Ehlers, of course, and he ended up signing in Carolina, but it seemed like either he did not want to come to Boston, or maybe there wasn't a ton of interest in him at the price tag that they were going to have to pay. It seems instead the Bruins wanted to get a handful of players for that amount of money instead of sinking it all into one player. So that I do think there is something to waiting another next year when it seems like there's going to be potentially much bigger names on the free agent market. Obviously, Mitch Marner was the big name here, but he never got to free agency either. It was a sign and trade with Vegas. But I think next year there's going to be those type players that may end up hitting the free agent market, with Jack Eichel being the biggest name and the biggest one, I think, potentially linked to the Boston Bruins, or potentially being a big sort of target that they could go after. So I think all of that is going to be interesting. And I think it in some ways makes sense for them to go short range, small money with the contracts they're doing now and save some money if they want to make a bigger splash next summer in free agency, or if they want to make some trades ahead of the deadline to augment this year's team. If, for instance, offense becomes as big an issue as some of us think it's going to be, where they're going to need to add a top six winger still, or at least somebody that can put the puck in the net. But I think we'll also see how Victor Arvidsson does. I think there is more skill there than people are giving him credit for. Yes, I think he only had like 15 goals or whatever it was with Edmonton last year as a 32-year-old. But like, he's a guy that's had a couple of 30-goal, 30-goal seasons, a bunch of 20-goal seasons, has scored a lot of goals in the league, has been a pretty consistently a top six guy. And he wasn't a top six guy with Edmonton last year because Edmonton is stacked and has a ton of forwards. And he probably played down lower in the lineup there than he usually does with other teams, and maybe wasn't on the power play as much. And that had an impact. He's going to get a lot more reps top six. He's going to get a lot more power play time. They're talking about him being the net front guy, as he was in LA when Marco Sturm was a coach there. So I think you're going to see a lot more production from a guy like Arvidsson this year for the Boston Bruins. And I think he's going to fit in really nicely here, whether he plays with Elias Lindholm or not. But I think you could consider him a legit top six winger, a top six forward. I think they at least brought in one. It would be nice if they brought in two, but they've also brought in some players, AHL players that are looking for a top six opportunity, some young guys that might fit into the top six, and have kind of left it open to see if anybody really seizes that role at a lower money rate, and any of the guys that they took a flyer on ends up seizing that job, instead of them going out and paying a premium at the trade deadline and maybe giving away a first round pick that they don't want to give up, or draft picks in general, or some kind of asset, or making that big splash in free agency next year. So I get why they did what they did. And I think they're being bashed a little too much for what they did in free agency. I think they made some smart moves, some small moves. They brought in veteran leaders because they knew that they wanted to do that. And that was something they didn't do last year. And it backfired on them a little bit. And I think they also wanted to get tougher to play against. Mikey Eyssimont is a punk, pain in the ass, guy that gets under your skin and a rat and all that stuff. He's going to be somebody Bruins fans love, and he's going to be a fan favorite, I think, immediately. He's somebody that other teams don't want to play and think he's a pain, and that's going to be a great acquisition for them as far as dragging them into the fight and getting games emotionally charged up that might not be otherwise. And it takes some of the weight off a guy like Mark Kostelik, as Tanner Jeannot's arrival does as well. That he doesn't have to be the guy constantly stirring it up, constantly fighting, especially with the concussion stuff that he had last year. I think you're not going to want to throw him into that immediately. And let him sort of ease back into that kind of stuff, because he's obviously that kind of player. And I think when he's feeling good and he's feeling right, he's going to dive into that as well. But he's not. You don't want him doing that at the very start of next year, as he comes back into full health and just wants to string together, a few weeks and months of playing healthy and playing, feeling good and staying in the lineup and just serving his role as a bottom six center. But Jeannot, they needed a player like that. And if that's the kind of money they had earmarked for Trent Frederick, and that's what they were going to pay him, but he didn't want it. He ends up getting the 8-year deal with Edmonton, or they didn't want to pay him that money and decided he's not worth that kind of money because he was always somewhat inconsistent trying to play that role. Let's go out and get a legit NHL heavyweight, a legit guy that has been good offensively in the league, has been fairly productive. Yes, has had injury problems, but can fill the same kind of role Trent Frederick did, but maybe is a little more willing to fight, a little more willing to defend his teammates, a little more willing to just play that role and be that guy instead of having designs or thoughts that he's a top six guy and he doesn't really want to do, it's a half-hearted sort of commitment to what he is because he thinks he's something else. Whereas Jeannot, I think, is under no illusions of what he is and what his role is and what he's going to be doing, and comes in with a lot more sort of gusto and a lot more willingness to just be that guy, and doesn't have any reservations about it. So it feels like to me, in some ways, it's that is worth it to bring in a guy like that, especially where $3.4 million is not going to be a huge cap hit with the salary cap going up as much as it is. Sure. He's 28 now. It's a 5-year deal, 32, 33 years old. He's probably going to slow down significantly, probably going to be more limited as far as the role that he plays and the minutes that he plays. And, you put him out there and fight in situations where you want him to fight somebody or, run around and throw a few hits and get the energy up. But it's probably going to be an even less of a featured role than he might be for the next few years. But you're going to want to have a player like that when Hagens comes in to make sure that somebody's got his back and protects him a little bit. And some of the other skill guys that they've got coming online and some of the younger guys they've got coming online, and just frankly Pasternak for that idea. You're going to want somebody that is willing to defend those guys and be a deterrent. And I think Jeannot is going to be will be that guy. Do I think he's going to score 27 goals like he did his first year in Nashville in the NHL? No, I do not think he's going to. But even if he can get to double digits and gives you a little bit of offensive pop along with the physicality and the willingness to defend his teammates, the energy, I think you're talking about a really effective player. If he gives you 10 goals, 25 points, and gives you over 100 penalty minutes, 150 penalty minutes, let's say, in 10 fights, I think that's well worth the investment. And it's well worth $3.4 million to get that kind of a player in your lineup on a consistent basis, and add him to Kostelik, add him to Isamont, add him to Zadorov, and you're starting to add up the physical nature of the team and the toughness to play against them, and sort of that physicality is back a little bit, where they're not going to be pushed around anymore, and they're not going to sort of give up in games and break and give up like they did last year. I think that's important to see that. And I think Jeannot is going to play a role in that. And I think it's well worth the investment to do that. All right, let's take a break in the action. For those of you listening to this episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast, we ask that you subscribe to the podcast, like, and leave a review. And for those watching the show on CLNS and enjoying all this hockey talk, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the Bruins Rinkside YouTube channel, where you can find our show and a lot of other great Bruins content with fellow Bruins talkers like Conor Ryan and Evan Marinofski. There's also the CLNS Media Network and Celtics All Access on CLNS, the NBA History channel, Patriots Press Pass, and Bruins Rinkside YouTube channels as well. Also, please make sure to turn on your notifications so you know the instant a new Pucks with Haggs video drops on the interwebs. And let's also give a great shout out to PrizePicks, the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Join over 10 million users and get started today. Instead of battling thousands of other players that could be pros or sharks, you simply pick more or less than a 2 to 6 player stat projections and you watch the winnings roll right in. It's fun and it's super simple. On PrizePicks, you can mix and match player projections from different sports, combine your favorite hockey players with players from baseball, basketball, esports, and so much more. You can now win up to 2,000 times your money on PrizePicks. PrizePicks now offers Venmo, MasterCard, and Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your accounts this sports season. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code CLNS. You get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, let's get into some questions here. This is a mailbag episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. This is from Mike from Stoneham, my longtime buddy, who gave me this question on the Boston Sports Journal Q&A. Hey, Joe, happy 4th. Beecher acknowledged he played most of the year with a hand injury that needed surgery. Letourneau played half the NCAA season with a broken hand and then had it repaired over the winter break and played through the healing process. Why wouldn't these guys just go on IR and get these things fixed ASAP and not let it ruin their season rather than playing through and playing poorly? Well, I mean, that's a good question. I think the answer is they clearly feel the pressure to keep their spot, to stay in the lineup by playing rather than, missing time with an injury where all of a sudden, if you're out of sight and out of mind for a few months, maybe you fall to the back of the line and you risk being forgotten. With neither one of them like firmly entrenched in their role, I think you try to play through it and be as tough as you can. And, hockey players want to play anyway. Like, that's the bottom line. Like, even kids my son's age, the 11, 12-year-olds, they want to play through anything, and they will play through anything. And I was actually explaining this to one of the other coaches that I'm coaching summer baseball with, who is a football guy from Michigan, did not play hockey, was not around hockey at all, really, but played a big-time Division I football and is from Michigan, and was explaining to him that hockey players just will play through anything, and it's just a cultural thing, and even kids that young try to play through anything. There's obviously limits to that. You're never going to have them play through a concussion, a head injury, anything serious, but they will try to play through anything else. If they don't think that it's going to hurt any worse and it's some other part of their body besides their head, they're going to try to play through it. I had a kid, one of Finn's longtime teammates, great kid, plays for the Bach Blazers. Spring hockey, not this year, the year before, he broke a bone in his hand or wrist in a game. We're playing against Andover. Kid threw a vicious body check on him, got penalized for it because they're still peewees and they're too young to body check. And ended up breaking a bone in his hand, and Luca is his name. Ended up coming back and playing, and played a couple more shifts, and then finally came to the bench and said, "Coach, it hurts too much to shoot. I can't play anymore." But I'm going to say played 2 or 3 shifts at least with a broken bone in his hand and tried to play through it before he finally gave up. And I'm glad he didn't hurt it any worse. I'm glad that he got it fixed and he's fine now, and he's been good ever since. But there's also a level of just pride and amazement at kids that age that will play through pain and will play through anything because they want to play hockey, and they know that there's a level of toughness to hockey players that it goes above and beyond the other sports. Now, like I said, as a coach, you need to watch and you need to make sure that they're not playing through something serious that like concussion type stuff. And as soon as there's any symptoms or issues or anything like that, or even suspect that there's a hit like that at that age, they're going to sit and they're not going to play. But like you also see a ton of banged up bruises, banged up knees, banged up hands, slashes in the back of the legs or the back, like all kinds of stuff you'll see that kids will play through because it's a point of pride for them because they will love to play. And that's just hockey players in general. But I will also say in these particular two cases, Johnny Beecher, a hand injury, not a hand injury. Do we really feel like that's going to change anything as far as him finishing off offensive plays? He went like 40 games without a goal. Do we really feel like he's still winning faceoffs with a hand injury? When he was taking them, and maybe they moved him to wing a little bit more. And maybe that's why he was playing wing because he had the hand injury, but he was still winning faceoffs. He still seemed very effective in most roles that he was playing in. He just didn't score, and he's never scored. And I just really don't feel like there's a close association between the season he had last year and the injury. I just think he's a very limited player. Maybe he'll prove me wrong this year and be totally different, but like he's never scored really at any level of big high level hockey that he's played. And I just don't think the injury had much to do with it. Dean Letourneau, I watched him play a bunch. I'm not sure that hand injury with him had a big effect on like the season that he had either. He just didn't have the puck much. He had a hard time getting to spots where the puck was going to be, where he could get the puck in space, where he could move with it and do much of anything. And that wasn't about his hand. It wasn't like pucks were bouncing off his stick. It wasn't like he was having a hard time getting shots off when he had the puck. He just was not getting the puck anywhere and making space for himself and really just getting a lot of puck touches at the level of play and the speed he was playing at and the intensity he was playing at. And again, I don't think that had much to do with any kind of hand injury he might have had. I think he just wasn't ready to play in Hockey East. He wasn't ready for Division I hockey at the NCAA level. And that bore out in his playing. Like, was he a liability? No, I don't think he was. I think he was like he was fine on a checking line kind of thing. But like you expect more, obviously, from a first round pick, and you expect offensive production and them to be able to make some plays and all that stuff. And I think he just like struggled to do that because it was a transitional year for him where he wasn't quite ready to be that sort of player. Now, do I think he's going to be a better player this year for having gone through that experience and being more prepared for it now? Absolutely. I think he looked better in development camp to me. Looked much more in line with all the other guys there, much more ready to compete in all the drills, and much sort of more well-rounded in all the different areas. He flashed just as much, if not, I think he flashed more at this development camp than he did the previous one, but there were flashes at the other one too. He just didn't seem like he was at the same level as most of the other kids at development camp a year ago, where this year he definitely seemed like he was at the same level. And, he was having no problem keeping up and excelling and being one of the better players and looking a lot more comfortable. So I think that's going to translate into a much better year at Boston College as well. But long story short, hockey players are tough, and I don't know that those injuries had much of anything to do with either of the down seasons that either one of them have. Feels like more of an excuse to me, to be honest with you, than anything else. A big year for Beecher. I think he's a guy that I'm not even sure he's back with the Bruins if he wasn't a first round pick, but he comes back for $900,000 for a cap hit for the coming year. A ton of players, forwards that are coming into a very competitive situation in training camp, not going to get anything handed to him. So he's going to have to earn everything. And I think he's one of those players that's on notice right now that if he doesn't absolutely bring it from day one of camp and all through the season, he's not going to play. And I think when Don Sweeney was talking about that with players, that might have been a guy he was referencing. It's sort of challenging, but we'll see how that goes. All right. Here's one from the real _ MJ84. They might actually have some bona fide young talent. Zellers, Minton, Hagens, just to name a few. Yeah, I mean, they do. And they still have Merkelov and Lysell around. And Patra is the guy you're not mentioning, who I think is more talented than short of. Oh, and we'll see with Zellers. Zellers looks good. But, he's still going to be a little bit away because he's in college. But like of the young guys that might be on the Bruins to start this year, I think Patra's the guy that you got to look at as the biggest potential impact guy. Could be a center in a top 9 role. Certainly will generate offense. Looked better and better at the AHL level as the year went on. Sort of like found that groove developmentally. That he was missing, kind of getting rushed before that point to the NHL. And I think last year was a big year for him to sort of regain his confidence in the AHL and get that playoff experience in the AHL down the stretch to make him ready to compete now for a job. And I think he's going to be a guy that's going to push hard because I think he's got more skill than a lot of these other players. And he's got the ability to generate offense, and he's competitive and he wins puck battles. Like, if he can get a little bit more speed and work on the power skating and get a little bit faster, I think everything else is going to fall into place for him. And he's even going to, I think, be able to avoid some of those hits that he, as an inexperienced guy, he kind of walked into a little bit more or opened himself up for a little bit more at the NHL level. And I think he'll be a guy that I'm looking forward to watching in training camp because I think he could be he could be one of those guys that ends up making the team. But yeah, just in general, bona fide young talent at the development camp, bona fide talent that was playing in the AHL playoffs last year, bona fide talent that's going to compete for jobs, NHL jobs in training camp in the fall. I think you're right on, and it's exciting times for the Boston Bruins. They've taken a step up as far as the young guys go, and some people complain that they signed veteran players to block those young guys, but like if the young guys are good enough, they're going to hop over the veteran players. I continue to like that the Bruins do that and force them to like push another guy out in order to win the job and don't just hand it to them, because that's how you end up with guys like Merkelov and Lysell at the NHL level if they're not quite ready to go yet, that can really hurt you and not even be productive enough to justify it either. So you want to wait until they're really ready by able to displace a veteran guy and outshine them and earn their spot, which I think the Bruins will give it to them if they earn it. They've shown that. I just don't think in the past the Bruins have always had the talent, enough talent in those guys to be able to displace established NHL veterans. All right, this is from Duncan Sewell in Souk. The lack of any support on the right-hand side of the defense coming through the draft. Do you see the Bees shelling out for a free agent defenseman? Obviously, this is before they re-signed Jokiharju. I think they have a little bit more between that and some of the other guys they brought in. They've got a little more right-side depth, and certainly Jokiharju, I think, is going to be a front-line top 4 kind of guy. Side note, but also a related question, does drafting Hagens address the offensive questions sufficiently, given he's closer to being ready than the other potential prospects were? Will Sweeney and company shift their free agency focus to address that hole and lack of depth on the blue line? No. They've re-signed Jokiharju, which gives them, I think, pretty good depth right now, and I think they have pretty good talent level as long as everybody stays healthy, and that you've got to always hope that your highest paid defensemen stay healthy. But I think Hagens is more a guy that might come into play after the season is, or towards the end of the season, after the college hockey season is over. If he's a dominant force at BC, I think he becomes a real potential guy that the Bruins could add on. And it'll be interesting to see if they want to burn a year of his entry-level contract and throw him on for what, might not be a team that's ready to do much in the postseason. Or if they would just wait for next year and put him down in Providence. But they wanted to do that with McAvoy, and then they had a bunch of injuries when they made the playoffs, and they kind of had to bring him up. And maybe something like that happens with Hagens as well. But I think all of that is way in the future and crystal ball sort of stuff. But maybe Hagens and the fact that he might be in Boston as soon as the end of this season kept them too from really shelling out for a top six kind of guy because they know he's going to be ready much sooner than later and could be, basically a year away or less. So yeah, I think that definitely forecasts into some of it, and they also left some room to dip into that free agency for forwards next year because Arvidsson's in the last year of his deal. He had signed a 2-year deal with Edmonton. They trade him for the last year of the deal, and they get him for this coming season, and that's it. So it'll be interesting to see how that all shapes up too. But they've got plenty of cap space for next year if they want to go after anybody in free agency, depending on which way the wind blows with Hagens. All right, one more here from DC 709. At this current moment, addition by subtraction is probably the best route for the goaltending situation. Remove Korpisalo, let DiPietro be goalie too. The next thing for me would be trying to move Mittelstadt for a second liner. That's probably the two moves I'd want to see most, and that's from DC underscore 709. Yeah, I mean, you'd love to be able to trade your overpaid veteran players that have underperformed for the contracts and were kind of dumped on you by the other teams. I'm still gonna let Mittelstadt see. I'm gonna see what Mittelstadt looks like in camp and next year after having some time to acclimate to the Bruins and sort of getting the second half of last year after the deadline to be his sort of orientation for the Bruins. I was not super impressed by what I saw. But I think you need to at least give it a little time before you start to try to flip him for somebody else. And I just think there's not going to be a lot of interest in him out there at this point either, going on what would be his fourth team and third within the last couple of years. We've got to see what kind of offensive upside he can have, especially for a Bruins team that needs the offense, right? Like they've recognized that. That's why they brought him in the first place. So we'll see what he can do on the power play and what he can do as a third line center if he's just put in that spot for a little while. Korpisalo, it would make some sense to move him, but I really think DiPietro is not a good choice for goalie 2 right now because I think to get the best out of Swayman, you need a situation where he's got a legitimate threat for playing time and somebody that's going to push him. And I think Korpisalo is that guy of the goalies that they have right now. I think that's the guy that could potentially light a fire under him, especially if you start playing him more, if he's playing well. And if it turns into not quite Allmark and Swayman, but something akin to that, where Korpisalo can push him and can motivate him and can keep it a very competitive situation. There should be no lack of motivation for Jeremy Swayman next year anyway. Just to prove that this past year was an aberration and an outlier and had more to do with the training camp holdout and the contract stuff and everything else. But I just think he seems to thrive and be better in a situation where he's got somebody pushing him, an NHL veteran, an established guy. And right now that's Korpisalo. Mike DiPietro, as good, he was the AHL goalie of the year, but that's not going to put a lot of fear of competition, I think, into Jeremy Swayman's mind, much less than it would Korpisalo, who's got well over 300 starts, was vocal about wanting to play more at the end of last year, and there were times probably he should have played more last season, and I'm sure that would play out again this year if he's there as the backup. So he's another one that the cap hit for him, I think, is going to be much less of a problem as time goes on and the cap goes up, and it's not going to seem like the albatross it might have seemed like when they first traded for him. But I think he's the right guy right now, and I don't think it makes sense to move him unless somebody was going to overpay because they were desperate for goaltending. But I just don't think he had the kind of year last year where anybody's going to overpay for him. I think you just have to hold on to that asset, hope that he really plays well 1 year, and then maybe you can flip him if you're confident you could replace him with somebody else that could be the good partner that you're looking for Jeremy Swayman. But in a vacuum, maybe those moves make sense, but I think right now patience would be the right thing for Korpisalo and Mittelstadt, unless somebody was going to blow you away in a trade and offer you some great assets, which is let's be realistic, that's not happening. Okay, that's like fantasy hockey stuff. So yeah, that we'll leave that one right there. All right. I think that's it for this week. Thank you everybody for listening. Thanks for the questions. Happy 4th of July, belated. I hope everybody had a fun and happy 4th of July and saw some great fireworks somewhere. I want to thank our sponsors, The show is brought to you by PrizePicks, the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks run your game. This is the Pucks with Haggs podcast, a proud member of the CLNS Media Network. Make sure to hit the subscribe button to the Bruins Rinkside YouTube channel and turn on notifications for when a new video drops on the channel. Please do that and leave a comment, leave a review, leave a like, do all of that good stuff. All right, everybody else out there, thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with 2 brand new episodes. See you at the rink.